Hello, hello. I'm Suki, Mrs. Cook's Books, and I'm going live today with Aria at home to talk about some spring releases. I'm just going to add our two lovely authors that we'll be speaking to today. So just bear with me. And if anyone's in the chat that can be amazing. So let's see. I'm going to add Nicola. Let's find her. Let's find Nicola. And Annabelle. So hopefully shortly they'll be joining us for the live. We'll be able to chat about their books. Hello, Nicola.
Hello. Hi. Hello.
We all made it.
We're all here.
Hurrah! How are you both?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Really good, thanks. Lovely to see you. Lovely to be spending the evening chatting books with you. It's always a fun thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Hi, Annabelle.
Hi, I'm just basking in relief that this is working, and I've actually
I know. It's just always a relief, isn't it, when everyone's there?
And
huge.
you know what? No matter how many times you've done it, it is always a relief.
Yeah.
Yay, we're all here and I'm really glad. So why don't we kick off? Lovely Yaz has put your two books in the corner, as you can see, the Paris Dancer and Moonlit Piazza in the corner as well. So
and I love you. Are you wearing green, Annabelle, and I'm wearing blue?
Oh, you match your jacket. Oh, you're matching each other's jackets.
Well, we're matching each other's jackets, which is very polite of us, isn't it?
Lovely.
Why don't we kick off with why don't we introduce you introduce yourselves and your books, a short synopsis of each.
Okay, so my book is The Moonlit Piazza. It's set in Italy in the Second World War. It's the second book. It's the follow-up to The Village Tutoria, in case you haven't read that. And it focuses on a family called the Capaldis and the restaurant that they run in this village in Umbria that's sort of been taken over by the Germans. And it sort of explores what happens to them and their friends during the kind of time of war.
Great.
Fabulous. I'm really enjoying it as well. Some wonderful, wonderful descriptions of food in it that I'm thoroughly enjoying.
It was a joy to write, Italian locations and food. It was, it's not a tough write, really.
I have lots of questions to ask you about how much cooking you do, but I'll try and stay on topic for now. My novel, which you can see behind me, is The Paris Dancer. It's my third novel. But it's my first historical novel, which I've loved writing. I have for 2 decades I've been a dance writer, so I've written about dance as a journalist for a long time, since I fell in love with the Argentine tango 20 years ago. But this is the first time I've been able to write about it in a novel. It's a dual timeline novel, and the historical aspect is set in the Second World War in occupied Paris with a dancer. It will come as no surprise to you to learn. And it's inspired by the real life story of a Jewish dancer, inspired by a woman actually called Florence Warren, who arrived in Paris in 1938 and worked at a music hall called the Bal Tabarin, and ended up going on to form a very successful ballroom partnership during the war, and used her position as a famous ballroom dancer to work for the resistance and help other people. There's also a present day strand which follows Miriam in New York as she uncovers the story of the Paris Dancer, and explores New York's dance classes and ballrooms as well, with a handsome young dancer, lucky her. So so there's two strands of the Paris Dancer.
Love it. Yeah, I love that. So probably my first question, and it's for both of you, is I cannot get over how meticulously both books were researched. Annabelle, I felt like I was in Italy. I felt like I was eating all the food. I could feel the dust on the roads. I could just feel it all. And with you, Nicola, I suddenly felt like I'd become this expert dancer, because the technical language, it didn't alienate you, but I really found myself kind of lost in it and engrossed in it. And I just, research wise, how do you do it? How do you go about it?
You take this
Oh, okay. Well, yes. So I just sort of jumped in with this one and read, because I've written two thrillers before, as I said, and this, because this is my first historical novel. I mean, this was the biggest difference between writing contemporary thrillers and writing historical novel, is the amount of research. So I jumped in, I read much as I could. I spent a lot of time in the British Library looking up books that I couldn't find elsewhere. I read a lot of autobiographies of people who were there firsthand, both people who were there, such as Edith Piaf or Urte, the designer, but also people like Paul Derval, who ran the Folies Bergère in the 1930s. So people who were contemporary to the era I was writing about, and who really knew about the sort of inner workings of a music hall like the Bal Tabarin. Yes, obviously a lot of dance research, looked at videos.
And are you a dancer?
I'm what I would call a social dancer,
right.
So which means I do it for fun, not professionally. As a dance journalist, I'm very aware of the massive gap between what I can do and what the professionals do on stage. I mean, some of it, and particularly the New York, when Miriam is exploring those dance classes and those ballrooms in New York, some of that was drawn from my experience of exploring different dance classes over the years. So it was really fun to bring in different dance teachers and different lessons. So there was a real mixture.
Yeah, so yeah, it sounds like, yes, you're drawing on your own expertise, but also having to do a lot of work to kind of fill in the gaps, as you say. And Annabelle, was it similar for you? Or I mean, do you, first of all, do you live in Italy? Because I do, I just, your novel, I just really just felt like I was there.
That's such a lovely thing to hear, because I think I've been a travel writer for 25 years.
Right, okay. And I didn't know that.
Great job. So all four of my novels have been set abroad.
Okay.
And I think one of the things that because I am a travel writer, I think what I really want to do is, and I've always loved to travel through books. Like when I, right from my very first days of reading, the fact that you can sit down with a book and really feel that you're somewhere different and really get under the skin of that place, if the writer knows it and has done the research properly. So for me, the location is like another character, and I want you as a reader to really feel that you say, to be able to hear the birds and smell the smells and all of that sort of stuff. And so I went out to Umbria twice, and the first time I stayed in a vineyard and just sort of talking to people, and then I stayed in Orvieto, which is the town. Amatino is a fictionalized Orvieto.
Okay.
I think with when you're writing about war, it's quite difficult if you're writing about somewhere small, because you're dealing with really traumatic times. And for me, I think just by fictionalizing a place, just distances a little bit, and I think that's important. So from the location side, it was going out there, and then I'm just a bit of a research nerd, to be honest. So the history side of it. And I knew so little about what happened with Italy in the war. And it's such an extraordinary story that they changed sides. They were with the Germans, and then Mussolini fell, and they went over to side with the Allies. And it's so, we all get taught about, and rightly so, what happened with Germany in the Second World War in school, but we just don't know about what happened in Italy. And it's just an incredible story.
I was really struck by that, actually. Reading your book, actually, that's not a story that we hear enough.
No, absolutely, and I think people don't realise that actually, Italy was fascist before it came along. Mussolini.
I definitely didn't realise that.
In the 20s, and we all have this image of how Italy is, and it is idyllic and all the things that we love about it, but it's got a very vexed history as well.
Yeah, and you touched on it just then, Annabelle. You've both got quite serious, if not traumatic, themes running through your books. And how did you kind of not make light of, but lighten that by the use of kind of words and fiction?
I think because you have to. I think in reality, there will always be otherwise you couldn't bear things. I think if everything, so I think from a reader's perspective, you've got to have some light and shade. Otherwise, it just becomes pointless. But I wanted to put those, and I'm sure Nicola felt the same thing. You can't trivialize war. It's a
No.
massive responsibility to write about this period, and I think you have to really tread very carefully. But I think we've all had, very difficult times in our lives, and it is humor and the moments like that get you through. And I think it's really important to show that, and so that lightens the book, but I think it's reality as well.
I think that's absolutely true. I think of often, yeah, and when I think about some of the hardest times of my life, that it's you're not always crying all the time. There are laughs and fun as well. In fact, I was going through quite a difficult time in the writing of this book, and that was something I experienced, with that kind of, that you can have the light and the laughter as well as the tears. Difficult as a difficult time. I mean, I found that to be true. I found that in my research to be true of the people who actually lived through these things as well. And I suppose specifically in the world I was writing about, in the world of a musical, about theatre, you have a lot of that life and light and creativity and stress as well, and parties and fun and romance and sex, and that was all part of it, even though there were terrible things happening, and there were terrible things happening, people still did go out and dance and party and fall in love. And that's why we talk about the Blitz, isn't it? Is, in fact, if anything, people almost want to have more fun or let go more, because their reality is so tough. They need
I think that's absolutely true, and that's what I loved about your book. So I love to dance. I can't dance any sort of proper form. I love dancing, and the joy and the release of dancing really came through, and I think that really elevated what was, such an intense and difficult period in history, and what your characters were going through. But they had this release, this beautiful thing.
I'm really glad it came through. And I think, I can't remember if it's a line I included in the book, but it's certainly one I've said since, is that I think, for me, in a way, dance is the opposite of death. It's everything that the opposite of death and grief, because it's the living body, it's a living, moving body celebrating being alive. So I think there's that really lovely juxtaposition between the life that you find in dance. But I suppose the same is sort of true of food in a way, isn't it? Food is, food gives us our nourishment. So in a way, food has that parallel, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I have to be honest, that there's been quite a lot of license that I've taken around the food thing, because I am really aware that there was a lot of shortages and people were hungry for a lot of the time, although rural communities did better because obviously they had funds. But I think what food does in the book is it's a way of bringing people together and cementing those family relationships and those those friendships that are what sustain the characters through the book. And so the fact that it's a restaurant, that coming together around a meal, even if it's a very poor meal because that's all they had, that kind of keeps them together. And I think that's the role that food has in a kind of bringing people together. And I think it does in all walks of life, but I think particularly in the book.
Can I ask you, did you cook as you were reading?
I want to know this. I want to know if you cook all the time and if it's always Italian food.
No, do you know what I do? I do cook. I do love to cook, but also I just think writing about food is a real pleasure as well, because it's so sensory. You've got everything from the joy of like a knife really slicing beautifully through something, to the smells while it's cooking, and it's such a sensory thing. And then eating, even the pleasure of serving it, and seeing the people you love around a table. It's a multi-sensory thing. So I think it's a real joy to write about.
I definitely was salivating when it's just the meals and how convivial, and the togetherness in your book, where the meals kind of brought to the story, were really kind of engrossing, really.
I think there's a kind of frustrated restaurateur or something like that, because there's always, but they've either run a B&B or they've run a restaurant, it's always something. Like, but I think I grew up in a big family, and there was
Right.
always people around,
You could
and
tell, yeah, I could tell that in your writing, but yeah.
yeah, amazing hosts. So I think that's, yeah, it's probably where it's come from.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
You can
Sorry, Nicola.
restaurants. Sorry.
No, no, sorry, I didn't hear
No, I
you.
was just saying you can live the fun of it without actually having to
Yeah,
run.
the stress of a restaurant.
Yes, God, who would have one now? Yes. So I think taking the easier option.
Absolutely. So kind of like moving back to your books, obviously when you're writing, you have character arcs for everyone, but who would just you say is your favorite character aside from the main characters in each of your books?
This is I'm always torn between two. One's really lovely, and one is less lovely.
Okay.
But they were both really fun to write. And so Bibi was one. She was an elderly neighbor who, yeah, I love Bibi. She lives upstairs above Mim in New York, and she is really sort of living her best life. She has been through terrible times, but she just is still she's still really alive and really present, and just has a wonderful time. And she has a little dog called Fifi LaRouge, and she kind of toddles around New York, and still dancing and still drinking martinis, and just, even though she's older, is still having a really wonderful life. So she was really fun to write. And then I have a bit of a mean girl in the Baltabaran, one of the dancers called Belle. And I've been brought up to be really polite.
I knew
so I
you were
think
going to
it's
say
really
Belle.
fun to write a mean girl, isn't it? So I you know, and she's quite an ambiguous. She is quite a dark character at times, but I like to write her. Sometimes the mean characters are more fun to write than the nice ones.
Yeah, I did love Bibi. I think she like basically entered the book, wasn't she carrying loads of bags of bottles, alcohol that were rattling? And I thought, yeah, I think I'm going to like this lady.
She likes a martini. She really likes a martini. Yeah.
Yeah. And how about you, Annabelle?
I probably have two as well. So my favourite is Eleanor, just because you know, I've sort of channeled my inner Maggie Smith Downton Abbey. That's fun to say all sorts of things that you would want to say. So she was a joy to write, and I love being able to put those phrases into her mouth. It's such fun. But then I think the interesting thing about writing a sequel is that the characters that were sort of quite side characters in the first book, you kind of have a chance to bring them out and tell their stories a bit more and I kind of found myself falling more and more for Massimo, who's the priest.
Oh, he's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's rather nice.
He's just like a knight in shining armor, isn't he?
He's I don't know, but in Rome they have literally there is a hot priest's calendar that you can buy in Rome every month. And so Massimo he would be on the hot priest calendar.
I was going to say he is a bit of a hot priest, thinking of doing that. Yeah.
Totally, yeah. So yeah, and it was interesting because I'd never written a sequel before, and I thought it was going to be easy, and actually it's quite difficult because you sort of you've gone through that arc with your characters, and it wasn't really until I realised that it was a great possibility to give stories to some of the side characters and really bring them out, that was when I really hit the ground with it, because suddenly it's like what do they call it, like a cinematic universe or whatever. You could really drill down into some of the other characters.
But you establish them very well for newcomers as well, because I haven't read the
I thought so
yet, but I did feel quite quickly that you do establish who everyone is, and I think you do that really well for newcomers who might be coming to this one.
I agree,
as well.
Because I'm a serial non-blurb reader, so I dived straight in, and it wasn't until I was halfway through, and I think we actually met, didn't we, briefly last week, when you said actually this is the second, and I hadn't realised at all because you'd explained everyone and I knew who everyone was.
That's really nice to hear, because I think sometimes you can feel you sort of joined a party a bit late with the sequel if you haven't.
It still works really well.
Not the case. Lovely to hear.
No, not at all. Now, I've always been kind of interested in writing, but I feel like ideas don't really come to me, so I'm always really interested to hear how writers get their ideas. I mean, where has it come from that you want to be in Italy and you want to write the story, or that you want to write a really hard historical fiction but make it a dual timeline in the present day as well? How does it come about?
Do you want to take this one, Annabelle, or shall I jump in?
You jump in, because I think I'm going to have to try and think about my answer.
Okay.
Well, mine was relatively straightforward in that the real life story of what happened at Bad was sort of too good to resist, really, because it was this extraordinary musical. It was once as famous as the Moulin Rouge, incredibly famous place where they really put on these enormous spectacles, and no one's really heard of it now. It was razed to the ground in the 60s, so it doesn't exist anymore, and a lot of huge stars perform there. But it was interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One is that Pierre Sandrini, the artistic director, was someone who really loved ballet and really loved dance, and he brought in classically trained dancers to dance the can-can, which before maybe hadn't been taken so seriously as a dance, and it certainly, these classically trained dancers hadn't performed in it, so he elevated it, if you like, and it became very, very successful. He was the son of a ballerina. He was quite an extraordinary man, and he was also extraordinary because he protected the Jewish artists who worked for him.
Yeah.
He advised them not to register, and he continued to give them work during the occupation. And these were really important things. And I felt, and this didn't happen across the board in other music halls, that wasn't always the case that Jewish artists got protected in that way. Other music halls fired them and didn't protect them. So I felt it was an enormous shame that this sort of unsung hero and his music hall had been forgotten. And the story of Florence Warren, the real life dancer who inspired the dancer who becomes in my novel Annie Meyer, because she had an extraordinary life. She was so brave, and had these sort of outrageous adventures, and as I said, during these tours of the prisoner of war camps with very, very famous people like Edith Piaf and Charles Trenet, she used her position as a famous dancer to protect and help other people. So it was just, their stories were sort of too tempting to resist, really. And in terms of the modern storyline, I wanted to give it, I suppose as a former thriller writer, I wanted to give it that sort of framing so I could keep some secrets and mysteries, back from the reader, and leave it as a bit of a puzzle for Miriam, the sort of modern day protagonist, to solve.
I could see that, but it was also just so interesting that you have pivoted, because obviously I didn't know that until now, from writing one genre to something that's completely different.
I love that people say pivot as well, which is hard to say as well. I like to think of it as sort of pirouette, or
Pirouette. Yeah. Love that. And Annabelle, was there something you wanted to add?
I mean, I think when you write a book that's I would very much echo what Nicola's just saying. You find actually when you sort of alight on a period that you want to write about, that's historical, so many extraordinary things have happened that you sort of come across. In a way, you sort of end up winding your story around these things that have happened, and that somehow time has forgotten or overlooked. And there's a big incident that happens in the Moonlit Piazza, a friendly fire incident. Well, it isn't, but it's based on a friendly fire incident that happened in Italy in 1943. That was awful, and really, really tragic. And I think you sort of have an idea, and then you sort of do a bit of reading, and then you go, oh God, that's really interesting, and I'll bring it in, and then you do a bit more reading, and in a way, it kind of sort of almost tells itself,
Right.
the story, and then what, as a writer, I think what you do is it's up to you to kind of really create. So we've just had, my cat's just joined us. She she's not involved in, so I shut the door and everything, but she's barged away in. I think definitely with historical novels, that's often what happens, is you just find, fact is so extraordinary that then you wind your fiction around it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated as to where writers get their ideas, because I just feel like I have just a block.
Are you a good eavesdropper eavesdropper. That's another place to get
Yes,
ideas.
I've heard that. That kind of just sitting in public places and you'll hear something, or something will spark a conversation in your own head, etc.
It was something I really missed in
Must
lockdown.
try
Really
it.
missed all that people watching and eavesdropping and
Yeah.
all that kind of business.
But also, I think
And
people often think that they have to have like a whole idea. I was saying to someone that I think there's a lot of self-defeatingness around writing. We all do it. You know, I can't come up with the idea, or I haven't got enough of a plot, or I spend my life saying to people, just start, even if you just got a tiny little incident, if that's what you can think of. You know, nobody starts a book with, well, I certainly don't, with the whole plot mapped out.
No,
That's a bit like
no, it's true. It's true. And actually, I think often that's why thinking about eavesdropping. Certainly, when I started out, it started with fragments of sort of, eavesdropping on conversations, or little bits of, I don't know, the sort of germs of ideas, or little bits of dreams, or whatever. You know what I mean? It sort of starts with these fragments that sort of can build up into something longer.
I love that. I love that. Just start, even if you just have the tiniest seed of an idea.
Yeah,
just write something down. So basically, you're saying it's
20
just a
minutes,
scene.
just a little bit of sort of playing with it, really.
Yeah, and kind of talking about your writing. Have you got any kind of information about kind of your discipline and where you write, how you write, how kind of regimented you are? I mean, do you treat it like a full-time job, is in the hours as such, or are you writing at 3 a.m. because that's when the ideas come?
I think anybody who can treat writing fiction as a full-time job is doing pretty well.
Yeah.
The author I know has to have a paying gig alongside. I have learned over the years I can write anywhere. I can write on trains. I can write pret-a-manger. I wouldn't do my final draft somewhere like that. But my best, when I'm really, really writing, I tend to just get up and start. So the best thing for me is to get up, make a cup of tea, go back to bed, and start writing. And because I tend to write fast and I redraft and redraft and redraft, I can have 1,000 words done by 10 in the morning.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Brilliant.
But it's not necessarily 1,000 words that I will keep.
Yeah.
But it's almost a brain dump. And I don't worry about writing beautiful prose. I'm just like okay, this is I'm just going to get this down, and then back to it in the future. So I think early mornings for me, because that's when your brain is least impacted by what everyday life, and you wake up fresh and you can really be in that world.
I completely agree. A lot of that really resonates with me. I suppose we're both journalists, aren't we, as well? So we're both used to sort of writing anywhere or everywhere or on demand, or I don't know. I think it's really good for sort of encouraging you, allowing you just to get the words on the page. And I think, I mean, like Annabelle was saying, I've always written novels alongside other work, alongside other sort of journalism work, or things, ghostwriting. I've written podcast scripts. I've done, all sorts of things. I mean, all to do with writing or editing, but other types of work. But if I can, as Annabelle was saying, I think I try and use that first hour or two of the day for my own novels, because that tends to be when I'm at my freshest and I have, the best sort of energy. And there's something about being in that kind of hypnagogic state as well, isn't there, where you're sort of close to your dreams. I don't know, that's really good for creativity as well.
I think that's so interesting you say that, because I often find, like, when I wake up, before I get up, if I have like a knotty problem or something to do with the book, that's when I sometimes have my best ideas. Is that when you're not fully awake, but you're not asleep either.
Yes.
And I think
exactly.
the thing is with writing is, what it allows you to do is you use your imagination in a way that you don't do apart from when you're a child. And I think people think, oh my God, I must have everything. I have a plot, and because we just forget how extraordinary our imaginations are, because we don't get to use them so much as an adult. And if you have just a little seed of an idea and then you go away, by the time you come back to it, your imagination will have come up with the next bit.
Yes.
I genuinely believe that our imaginations are as
it's an amazing thing, and it's one of the for so many writers, it's one of our favorite things about writing. And I call it magic because I don't know what else to call it. Well, I mean, I'm not the first because Gilbert obviously wrote Big Magic,
Yeah.
but there's sort of that magic of creativity is so exciting and it's so much fun. And I suppose we call it magic because we don't know, ideas and people and things come from, well, we don't know where, and there's something so joyous and playful about that, and is a kind of thing you don't really get to experience as an adult, but very often except through creative work. So it's just such a wonderful thing to experience. And I always say, for example, with the Paris Dancer, the character of Belle again, now she's not a character I planned for. When I sat down to plan out the book, I didn't write Belle in there, but she just sort of appeared on the page, sort of said, "Here I am," and I had so much fun writing her. But she, you know, I didn't know she was going to turn up, and I don't know if you have any examples like that from the Moonlit Piazza, but it's really fun, isn't it?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, you know, and it sounds hard to say these things, I think, without sounding a bit pretentious, but there's absolutely what happens. You have an idea for a little side character, and then they just muscle in, and they're just like, no, kind of interesting, and like, give me some more time. And you sort of do. And my little German soldier who Eleanor takes under her wing, his story just snowballed as, you know, and as it went on, and suddenly there was all this, he was sort of so good at cooking and a bit of a show off, and and I hadn't planned for any of that. So, you know, he's just muscled his way in.
I love that.
That's amazing. I love that you've got characters in there who weren't necessarily in your head when you thought of the book, but then just appeared and were there and arrived and stayed.
Yeah, it really is. It really is fun.
So, I always like to ask, if we had like a dream casting of, let's just say it's the two characters that you've just said that you kind of liked the most in your novels, who would you have play them if they were televised or in a film?
Well, she's the wrong height, but I would go for Meryl Streep as Eleanor, because she could.
Oh yes, I can see it.
Sort of think of her character Miranda from Devil Wears Prada. So
yeah.
But then a little bit like Mamma Mia as well, insofar as she's sort of the host, sort of
thing. So, you know,
family kind of, yeah.
And because I always cast my books, always.
Oh,
I always have an image of who my characters are. I just find it quite helpful, and so I had particularly had someone in mind for Massimo, but one of my friends read it, and she was like, "Well, Batelli is George Clooney." So I think if it's George Street, then I've probably got a hit on my hands. So I'm thinking.
Absolutely. And obviously, when the film gets made, we can all come and visit you, Annabelle.
Absolutely, yes, in my LA.
I was thinking maybe possibly Natalie Portman as Annie. Well, partly because part I was thinking of her in Black Swan and her dance experience, and I just I don't know if she'd want to do all that training again.
She's got it, hasn't she?
Yeah, exactly, and she did so well with the dance training before. And then I have a friend in the West End called Jenna Organ, and I was wondering about her for
Phoebe.
Miri. Well, actually, no, for Miriam.
Oh, right,
I don't know about Phoebe. Who do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I was sitting here thinking about it as we were talking.
She's a very
shame Iris isn't still alive. She'd be a great BB.
Who's that? Sorry.
Sorry.
Oh, she's like she was sort of 80 something, and she was very little and petite. She had these big round glasses, and she always wore like really eccentric clothes. And she sounds perfect. She sounds
perfect. And maybe Scarlett Johansson or someone like that for Belle. I'm thinking about that. Dream casting.
Yeah, Belle. I really enjoyed everything that Belle did. I just thought she was great. Oh, yeah. So yeah, I always like to ask as well, what are you reading at the moment? Are you, when you're not reading your own drafts and, you know, proofreading and going through line edits and copy edits, what are you reading that's someone else's?
Well, I'm just finishing the Moonlit Piazza, obviously, which I have absolutely loved. And I will be raving about that to all my friends. And I've also got a book that I've read before, actually, called 12 Minutes of Love by Katka Kasabova, which is about tango, and I'm just revisiting it ahead of an interview about tango that's coming up. But I am also mentioning it because if anyone's interested in tango, it's so good. It's so good. I can't remember if I said the title, but it's 12 Minutes of Love, and it covers lots of things. The hold that Argentine tango can have over you, a little bit of its history, a little bit of what it's like to kind of fall down the rabbit hole of obsession with Argentine tango. So yeah, those are two by my bed at the moment.
Sorry, and is that non-fiction?
That's non-fiction.
Yeah.
It's a memoir. Yeah, it's a memoir, but also, as I say, it covers tango's history, and it's always a book I recommend to anyone who's interested in tango.
Oh, okay.
Well, I've just finished a fabulous book, all set in Paris in the Second World War, about dancing, which is.
Don't you feel like the expert in dancing after reading the Paris Dancer? I can't believe how much I know.
The other thing I would say, Nicola, is that I think sometimes with books where you're waiting for the reveal all the way through the book, and then it comes and you're a bit like, oh, okay. And what happens at the end of your book has really stayed with me, both in the modern day timeline and in the historical timeline. And I think that was just brilliantly done. And I was just like, okay, wow. So for me, that really hit me at the end.
Thank you. Thank you.
On a completely different note, I have just finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which just blew my mind.
Ooh.
Absolutely brilliant.
I haven't read that yet.
Recommend, yeah.
But it's so because it's all set in the gaming industry. Yeah. But someone else said to me, it kind of doesn't matter. It could be set in the art world. It could be set in public. Yeah. The characters and the relationships. Brilliant book. I'd recommend it to anyone.
I can just picture the cover. Who wrote it?
Gabriel Zevin.
Okay.
But yeah, it's fantastic. So I think it's a masterclass.
Okay, that's definitely one I'm going to put on the list. How about you, Suki? Are there any others did you recommend to us?
Oh, do you know what? I read a lot, but one that stayed with me this year. So obviously I've just finished your two books, and I was very engrossed in them because obviously I was going to be chatting to you both, and really enjoyed them both, especially where they took me, really. But another book I would recommend is have you read Broken Country?
I have actually. Yeah, really enjoyed that.
What's that about?
It's about, well, probably Nicola can describe it better than me, but it's set. It's also dual timeline, isn't it, Nicola? And it's set in.
Yes. Is it 50s and 60s?
Yeah. 50, yes, and then present day. Sorry, we're not very good at this, are we? You're not really selling it. But
it's been a little while since I read it. I read a proof, and I can't.
I did too, and that's why I'm having trouble remembering. I just remember thinking this book is brilliant. It's kind of a farming book. It's Claire Empson, but she's Claire Leslie Hall. She's written it as. It's just been chosen as Reese's Book Club pick, and it's set in Devon, Cornwall, and it's kind of like second chances for first love, but not in a kind of cheesy way. It's really quite something. It's very good.
And I love the depiction of and this is a strange thing to say, but growing up in rural Wales, I really loved how she wrote about farming and the animals and living so close to nature. I thought she wrote about that really beautifully and compellingly, and it's not something that and it felt like it reminded me of my childhood, kind of going around helping with the lambing, and it's just not something that you really see in novels very much.
No.
And
I think she kind of I think I read some of it. It took her 4 years to write, and she kind of referred to it as her farmer's novel.
Yeah. I heard that.
So that's kind of one of the books I've read this year. But do you guys have a favorite book of all time that you kind of press into other people's hands, or you say you must read this, or do you kind of say, oh, you like this, so you must read this? Basically, is there a favorite book that you will always recommend to someone?
I mean, there's always about sort of a top 5 or 6.
Okay.
And they sometimes change a little bit, but there are a couple that always stay on there. and the kind of the classic choice is Rebecca, which I know isn't particularly
That's my favourite book
original,
of all time.
but it's a novel I fell in love with when I was 13. It was so exciting. Oh my goodness, I'll never forget that kind of visceral, so exciting to read, like my heart kind of thumping.
The fear
some of those twists,
kind of what's happening.
Yeah, and it's just such amazing storytelling.
It's the suspense, I think. She's just such a clever suspense writer.
I mean, it's wonderful. And you read some of those snooty reviews that were written at the time about who was going to be here today and gone tomorrow. Ha 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 ha. She sold millions. And the other one, just very quickly, that I always recommend is Fingersmith for people who haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it.
Fabulous. Really fabulous for people who love historical fiction. Again, fabulous twist, brilliant characters. One of those books that, you know, you're a bit jealous of people who haven't read it yet because they've got it ahead of them. So those two, but there are always lots of others, but those two are usually in the kind of top 5.
It's so difficult, isn't it? I just did a podcast a couple of days ago where it was like Desert Island Discs, and you had to choose your all-time 5, and I really struggled, and I kept thinking, oh, I'll choose this one, and then, but I suppose what I always come back to, I think, is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini.
Right.
He was the book that taught me how to write about war, because it's you know, in Afghanistan, and it's that thing again. It's traumatic and it's terrible what's happening, and yet there is such beauty in the book. And I kind of love to read books that are set abroad. As I say, it started my love of travel, and so my other one is always Gatsby, because I think I read that in my teenage years, and it was so glamorous, and it was my love affair with New York.
So it's interesting that you've chosen 2 historical fiction books. Is there another period of history, actually this is for both of you, that you would like to research and write about?
Well, just very quickly, not going terribly far back, but I'm looking at a story in the 20s, and it's not so very much further. It's not so very far from the Second World War. But again, I'm thinking about the dance.
Significantly different,
yeah, very different in feel, and so that's one I might look into. How about you, Annabelle?
Oh, I'm my next one I think will be contemporary, because the one thing that I miss, because I miss with writing historical fiction is that you can't comment or get into stuff about how we live now, because it's historical, and so I quite miss that. So I'm looking forward to doing something contemporary next, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, and is that what's next, or is that a maybe what's next?
For me,
yeah.
I've got an idea of what I want to do next. Yeah,
okay.
But
it's contemporary.
I've got another project on the go at the moment, so it's a while off, but it's there. It's sort of thinking of me in the distance.
Okay. And how about for you, Nicola? What's next?
I am at the moment I'm writing a contemporary love story as well.
Oh.
I've written love stories as parts of my novel, but I've not ever made the love story the thing. And I'm really enjoying it. It's really fun. A comp I sometimes mention, although it feels ridiculous because it's such a successful book, is One Day, which is I love that through the decades kind of love story about a relationship between 2 people, you know, through a few decades. So that's what I'm looking at. But it's hard. I mean, we all know love stories, but it's hard to write one. You know, it's
something
fresh. New challenge, especially to kind of put the love story center stage.
I think it's just hard about like people who are happy as well. I mean, I just think there's always there's endless stuff to explore in sort of tough times for me.
Interestingly, so I went to hear David Nichols talk a while ago, and I said to him, "Do you have any advice for someone starting a love story?" And he said, "Keep them apart as long as possible." He said, "If you look at Romeo and Juliet, they're only together for a few pages, like they're barely together any time at all." And he said, and actually, it's funny, it hadn't really quite struck me like that, but most of the kind of big love stories, I don't know if you watched One Day on television. I mean, I thought they did a great job, but actually, again, they're not together that much, are they? There are whole episodes where they don't even see each other. You know, he really keeps it hard.
Amazing. Wow. So another pivot for you, or pirouette, should I say?
I know, but I might get back to historical fiction as well,
Yeah.
because I really enjoy doing
I
that.
love that. I love that in your brain you have the choice of what you want to write next.
Yeah. But it's fun. I enjoy doing different things, and this has to be something. It has to be something you love doing, and I really enjoy the challenge of different stories.
Yeah. Well, you're
I think
both.
that's the thing with writing. You know, you're invariably stuck in a room on your own for a long period, and you know you don't make a fortune, and so you have to do it because you enjoy it and because you love it. You know, and because you feel like you're privileged to be doing it, which I think clearly we both do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You clearly both love it. Yeah. Well, I think we're coming probably about to the end of our chat, but I just want to say thank you so much, both of you, for joining me this evening. I've really loved reading your books. I've really loved finding more out about your process, particularly research and writing. They're both out now. The Paris Dancer is here, and the Moonlit Piazza, before I drop it, is here.
Exactly out today.
It's out when, sorry?
Next,
Oh, is it not out yet? Sorry.
you've got time to read the Village Tutoria.
Oh, yes, indeed. So is
And
the Village
then
Victoria.
Yeah, to come. So it's perfect
And
timing.
also, Aria on the Head of Zeus Instagram channel will be holding a giveaway for both books. So keep your eyes peeled if you liked what you heard and saw today and would like to read them. But yeah, apart from that, have a lovely evening and thank you.
thank you so much, Shuki. It's been really lovely
No,
chatting to you.
it's been lovely speaking to both of you. Thank you so much.
Oh.
Take care.
Bye, you both. Have a lovely
See you.
evening. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.